Hello, I'm Philip Scott and welcome to The Dispute, the show where we ask the big questions that are affecting you. A little later we'll be talking to a cyclist and a driver to hear their views regarding road safety. But first up we'll be discussing the controversy surrounding black cabs and Uber drivers in London today. Take a look at this. Are black cabs at risk? The black cab has been roaming the streets of London, picking up tourists and businessmen and women, and generally providing affordable transport across the capital for many years. What started off as licensed horse and carriage, with the advent of the internal combustion engine since the turn of the 20th century, the number of taxis has steadily risen to a point that now 21,000 licensed cabs fill the street of London. More recently, Uber, an American taxi company that operate in big cities, have put black cabs under a lot of risk and strain. Uber doesn't have the same restrictions as black cabs. No knowledge test, no language test, and generally a lack of sufficient background checks.
Uber affects us quite a bit in that they are cheaper, they're much more easy to obviously pick up from the street now because they can tap in on their mobile phones. I can understand why the youngsters and business people want to use it.
Can we trust these drivers that pop up on our phone to pick us up? So the main question we'll be discussing is, are black cabs at risk? You can join in the discussion as well by tweeting us at The Dispute Show or use hashtag The Dispute. Make sure you join our Twitter poll and let us know if you prefer using black cabs or Ubers. But for now, I'm joined by Sean Day, who's been working as a black cab driver for 15 years, and Stefan Ferrell, who is a pro Uber user. Welcome to both of you. Sean,
Thank you.
Do you think that your profession and livelihood are coming under increased pressure from Uber drivers?
I think it's under pressure because of the sheer numbers of Uber drivers out there. Transport for London are hemorrhaging about 700 new licenses every single week. And I think that's causing a congestion problem in London. And I think that's where we're suffering.
Purely from the more cars being on the road?
There is en masse oversaturation of the market, yeah.
Fair enough, fair enough. Thank you very much, Sean. And Stefan, do you think Uber drivers should be regulated as strictly as black cabs?
I think because of their setup in terms of using different technologies, I don't think they should be as harshly regulated as black cab drivers. They have a different business model. I feel that they should just be kind of competent drivers, but not so heavily regulated.
Okay, yeah. So it's because it's a slightly different market. They have different regulations, perhaps. Okay, thank you very much. We do have some questions from our studio audience as well. Hello, good evening. Jack, we have a question. Who have you got your question for?
Yeah, my question's for Sean. I think the main thing with the whole Uber versus black cab debate, for me, it just comes down to price. So, do you think there's a way that black cabs can adapt their pricing?
I think it's worth remembering that the pricing structure is set by Transport for London, and that is to account for safety and liberty. So black cabs have to drive a purpose-built vehicle. Now that is about £40,000, and that is to accommodate the disabled, the hearing impaired, and to account for a lot of people's needs. So I think the price is based on cost indexes of running that vehicle. Where I think they can come down is the apps like Get and Halo offer fixed pricing to customers. Often what is compared is the street hail to the app. And it's not, it's one of the same. If you was on Get, you could arrange some of the fixed pricing. I did a comparison today, funnily enough, 2 comparisons, and Get, they fared favourably, £1 or £2 difference with Uber. So, but I don't think they have the marketing platform Uber has. And so it's not getting through to the people that they could actually take a black cab at fixed pricing, which does pretty well. I think it does pretty well.
It sounds like black cabs are sort of catching up in a way with the technology of using apps in order to be...
Well, in all fairness, the technology was there before Uber came. Halo was here before Uber came.
Yes, and
it's just Uber had a massive marketing machine behind it, so it got into public consciousness. And
okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any more questions? We should have a question for Stefan. No, that's all right. Yeah, well, so Stefan, the security of using Ubers versus black cabs, as soon as you get into a black cab, it is a heavily licensed vehicle in terms of all the restrictions that are going on it. But Ubers, it is someone's car that they are hiring out. Are you concerned at all with the safety measures that are in place for Ubers?
I can't say that I am. Every Uber that I've been in, it has been someone who's friendly, who I can talk to, who's professional, who can clearly drive. So I've never felt unsafe in a car. No way more unsafe than if I go into a black cab. I think it's pretty similar.
You think it's similar sort of levels of... Anybody else with a question? Yes.
So Uber drivers use sat-navs, and I've been taken around the Blackwall Tunnel to get to the O2 before. I live by the entrance to the tunnel, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Sorry, was this,
because it's just
was
down
this
the
in
road.
an Uber or was this
in an
a
Uber.
black cab? In an Uber they
So,
went the wrong way.
Like, how, like, obviously they're not that reliable.
Well, that's a very good point, because obviously, as a black cab driver, you've had to take the knowledge. Could you run us through the steps that you had to go through in order to get that?
It takes roughly between 2 and 4 years, and it is... when you get out, you're fully conversant with the infrastructure of London. You pretty much know everything. Now, if you're a black cab driver, I don't think a day goes by where I'm not asked on the street by someone who doesn't know the name of the street, doesn't know... usual one is they will say, could you take me to the Holiday Inn, please?
Yeah. And of course, you go, yes.
And so you go through this deductive process where you get to the one, and you actually... They even can just describe the street, and you can pretty much know where they're going. I know that if you don't put in the right postal code, then you can end up going through the Blackwall Tunnel and not being dropped at the north entrance.
Now, there is obviously a benefit to using Google and SatNav alongside the knowledge in terms of letting us know how busy the roads are and potentially avoiding. Do you yourself use a SatNav in order to help avoid that?
I mean, it can come in handy. If ever I need to refer to it, it's just I'm not enslaved to it as such.
Yes.
And I think part of the problem is what I've seen in the last 6 months is probably more accidents involving Uber drivers than I've seen in 15 years of being a taxi driver.
Because they're watching their staff SatNav instead. Yeah.
I mean, it is, especially London, it confounds them. It's like tangled fuse wire. I think it's very easy
going
to
down
get...
the wrong streets. And
all the time, coming at me, face on.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off there. We do have a question. We're joined by Denise Head on Skype. She has a question for Stefan. Hi, Denise. Are we there? What's your question?
Hello. Whilst I believe that competition is a good thing in industry, do you think that it is fair that an Uber driver can be operational after a 2-hour training course, whereas a black taxi driver has to complete rigorous tests and exams over approximately a 2-year period?
Thank you very much. Stefan, do you think that Uber drivers should probably have more training?
I don't believe so. I think they use a different technology. They do use their sat-navs. With the knowledge, they don't rely on a sat-nav to get around this. They have to learn the streets.
Added bonus on there as well.
Yeah, they have to learn their streets, whereas an Uber driver can literally just go in, have kind of a briefing, get their license to drive an Uber car, and then use a sat-nav to get around. So they don't really need... they don't need the years of training.
There is obviously a big point that comes along when you do book an Uber. There can sometimes be a language barrier. When you're going through black cab training, presumably English is quite a strong requirement for driving around London.
Yes, and it's also a very stringent vetting process.
Yes.
So all the unsavouries tend to get weeded out. I think part of the problem with Uber, and I think it was under this umbrella that technology would actually make people safer, but I think it gives a false sense of security.
Yeah.
In the sense that I don't know anybody who's ever been turned down by Uber. You know, so anybody can apply and anybody can work on that platform. And last year alone saw 31 convictions for sexual assault.
Purely from
Uber drivers.
From Uber drivers.
Yeah. And so, but we're given this impression that it is very accountable, it's legitimate, and I think we buy into the presentation where the terms and conditions, if you read them, and we never do, because there's about 27 pages, will say that Uber are not liable for anything that happens between
Yeah.
the driver and the passenger.
There are also, unfortunately, cases of sexual assault with black cab drivers as well. I mean,
No, I'll counter that. There's been 3 in the last 50 years.
Okay.
Yeah, you can pretty much name them. And the reason why people, I'll preempt you, John Warboys, that's who you're going to say.
Probably. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, it is, yes.
Yeah.
Because when people say John Warboys to me, I think he's escaped prison for the millionth time.
Yeah.
Because he's always mentioned, but he is 1 out of 2 and possibly 3, the third one in 50 years. Now that makes them, you can add a doctor, you could say it was Shipman or Crippen,
Yes,
you know.
yeah,
It makes them the
of course.
safest form of transport option in London.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That is a brilliant point to go on. So, Stefan, have you ever used Uber Pool, where you share the car with other people?
I haven't used it, my friends have.
Yeah.
They haven't had a problem with it. They've met
No?
good people, safe people, and then it reduces the price of their journey
Yeah.
quite a lot.
So, do we have any more questions from our studio audience?
Yeah.
Yes. Hello.
So when I get in a black cab, of course, I know I'm covered insurance-wise because of the legalities with TfL. In Uber, you do not have to have full cover. You could have just third-party cover. So if something happens, you could be pretty messed up, and you haven't got anything for it. Is that a worry? I mean, it rarely happens, but it could happen. So something could happen to you.
So, under Uber drivers, it's under sort of a third-party insurance.
You don't have to have full party.
It's a bit unfair because
yes. No,
it
of
must
course,
be
yeah.
noted that an Uber representative didn't turn up. And
Yes,
he's
yeah,
just,
no,
he's
absolutely.
a passenger.
But in terms of the insurance that's covered on black cabs, how does that work for passenger safety?
You have to have public hire insurance and apply for hire, to apply for hire as a taxi driver, and it's displayed in the cab itself. Whereas Uber doesn't do checks on all that you need is personal insurance, and they don't do checks on that you have commercial insurance.
In terms of keeping up with sort of up to date with regulations with black cab drivers, how often is it that you have to since getting your license? How often have you had to take more tests in order to sort of retain your license, as it were?
Well, you don't take more
No.
tests yourself because it's on the job. You keep doing it
Yeah.
on the job, so that's your revision in itself. Every 3 years you renew your license, and so you have to meet the conditions of fitness, and so does the taxi.
Yes.
To be licensed every year, the taxi has to meet certain conditions of fitness, and I renew my license every 3 years, so I'm
Yeah.
medical and also just a vetting
It's all
process.
very, very up to date knowledge,
DBS.
which other drivers don't necessarily get.
I
on
have to
the road,
do an advanced DBS check. And part of the problem with Uber is that you have to be in the country 3 years before you can have a DBS check done on you. So, you know, a lot of drivers entering the country haven't got those checks.
Yes, yeah, no, of course. Now, sorry to go back to the price again, but I have read a statistic where it can cost up to £80 for a trip from central London to Heathrow, which is the same price as a flight to most European countries. Do you know how we can sort of combat that, or why the pricing's there in that case?
Yeah, again, Get and Halo do fixed prices for £60.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think what is happening at the moment is you have Uber who are hemorrhaging money into trying to dominate markets.
Yes.
And they are subsidising fares. So I know they're valued at about 60 billion, but they're about 1.5 billion in the red in real terms.
Yeah.
Now this is about taking control of markets. And once they've taken control, they no longer have to offer those
There's no
subsidies.
monopoly there. They've got it. They can then change the prices as they
no
see
longer
fit.
yes, and all that they're concerned about will be the shareholders, and that they make the money back.
Yeah. No, you did say earlier about the different cards that you can have as a taxi driver. You've got the greens and the yellow.
The yellow badges.
And you think the yellow badges are under more risk from Ubers than the green badges. Could you just briefly explain the difference between
Yeah,
the
I
two
think
badges?
so. The green badges are all London, so you can operate wherever in London. You can drop off in any area and pick up there.
Yeah.
Whereas the yellow badges, they operate in the suburbs on the outskirts of London. They can take into central London, but they have to return back to the suburbs.
They have to return
And
further,
I think when you see Uber just going into central London, and they've decimated those local minicab companies, you know, they're not going to apply for hire, say, in Barking. They're
Yes.
going to go into the West End and apply for hire, because
Yeah.
basically that's what they're doing.
So for Stefan, when you get an Uber, obviously there is no exchange of cash, which is something that happens. Have you ever tipped an Uber driver that you've got before?
Once.
Once, yeah.
Because they were so friendly, they were talking to me,
Yeah.
making conversation along the way.
How did you do that? Was that a cash tip
Yeah.
that you gave them as well?
Cash tip. And then you rate them afterwards. But I gave them cash tip because they helped me with my bags in the car, opened the door for me. So it was a service that they provided. So I did tip at the end.
Lovely, lovely. And obviously, there is a little bonus that you get with having a cash exchange. Do black cabs, or are black cabs moving towards accepting card payments? Do you know?
Again, if you compare like with like, with Halo and Get,
When you've got the apps,
you have several forms of payment.
Yeah.
You can pay by credit card, you can pay by, well, contactless obviously, but also cash, and you can have account just like Uber. I think we're always attacked for being the cash-only
heavy
brigade.
cash, yeah.
That's been mandated, so by September, that all taxis will have to accept credit cards. But it's also interesting that Uber only offer one form of payment option, and that's account.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I am going to have to cut you off there. That's all we've got time for. But we have got a few thoughts from Twitter. Let's have a quick look. Do you think expensive uni fees are the reason many students would prefer to use Uber? Well, guys, do you think that's why you would prefer to use Uber than sort of black cabs? Yeah.
Well, not the fees though. Just being a student, it's you're going to go for the cheap option.
You're going to go for the cheap option.
Maybe if
absolutely.
Uber paid corporation tax, they might be able to reduce university fees.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Let's move on to something else now.
It's the
one more.
convenience
The
as well.
team Uber, when black cabs lower their prices, I may consider using them. Well, of course, we have heard that the regulations are from the government, so in order to get that, we will have to take a petition to the government, I'm afraid. We also have the results from our poll. We did ask if you prefer using black cabs or Uber, and let's have a look at what you guys have said. It's 56% Uber, 44% black cabs. That is very close, actually. That's a lot closer than I was expecting it to be. So thank you very much for getting involved. I am afraid that is we all have time for on that question. Thank you very much to Sean and Stefan for coming in today. And for Denise, our Skype caller, for calling us as well. Now, drivers on the road say one of the biggest risks they face are cyclists. Take a look at this. Is the frustration towards cyclists justifiable? Are our roads safe for both cyclists and car drivers? 610,000 bicycle journeys happen each day, and with Boris Bikes, anyone can hop on and ride the streets of London with no experience. Cyclists are everywhere, especially in London. But does cycling cause issues for road safety as a whole? Cyclists are freely allowed on the road, whereas all other vehicles have to have insurance. Should this be implemented onto our bicycle riders as well? Currently, any cycling accident is covered by work and home policies. Over 20,000 casualties involving cyclists were reported in 2015. 113 of them fatal. How do we fix this problem? Should we have more bicycle lanes? Should bicycles have insurance? Or should we change the driving test to make drivers more aware of cyclists? So our question now is the frustration towards cyclists justifiable? Once again, you can join in by tweeting at The Dispute Show or using the hashtag #TheDispute. And you can also vote on our new Twitter poll. Do you think cyclists should have stricter regulations? I am joined by Michael Miles, who has a strong opinion about cyclists on the road, as well as Tor, who is an avid cyclist himself, and he's been cycling for nearly a year now, and he does 15 to 20 trips a week. Thank you very much for joining us today, guys. Mike, we will start off with you. What frustrates you about cyclists?
The shorter answer would probably be what doesn't frustrate me about cyclists. I've been driving for 9 years now, and I can't remember the amount of times I've had cyclists come in front of me at lights. They completely ignore zebra crossings. It's not even just myself, it's pedestrians as well. You know, if I'm pulling out somewhere and they'll just go round me onto the pavement, almost knock over whoever the hell they want. It's just, they're inconsiderate and they're entitled, and I just don't think they should be on the roads.
Well, thank you very much for your views, some very, very strong views there. And Tor, over to you. Do you think our roads are too unsafe for cyclists?
I think so, yes. And I think there's something about the roads being unsafe, but also people not respecting each other. Like, I think the cyclists has something to do with respecting car drivers and lorry drivers, but I think also that we're moving into a time where there are going to be only more cyclists on the roads. I think there is sort of a respect coming back from lorry drivers and car drivers as well. So yes.
Okay, so it's almost like, yes, there is respect for
Yeah.
cars, but also we want respect for cyclists. It's almost like equal rights for the road, if you will.
Equal right.
Do we have any questions from our studio audience? Yes, hello.
Hi, yeah, so I've got a question for you against cycling. I went to Amsterdam and I saw how wonderful it is when cyclists are on the road. They're safe, it's fabulous. Why can't London do the same? I think, with opening the new bike lanes, it does enable drivers to have a bit of a more, freer road for them. Yeah. Sharing it with cyclists. That can work, that's a solution.
Do you think we should follow more of a...
I believe it's anything that will get them sort of in their own area, out of the way, is always good by me. I know I think it was the 1970s, many European cities decided, they would move more towards having bikes as opposed to cars.
Yeah.
I think for us it's too ingrained. We have black cabs, as our previous guest was saying, we have buses, we have these vehicles that are so ingrained in our culture, in our tourism, we can phase them out, but we'll never fully get rid of them.
Yeah.
I think we could move towards it, but it's going to be a long process.
Of course. We've got to basically restructure the whole of London in order to...
Exactly, and it's extremely expensive.
Now, we do have cycle highways that are being built and already up and running and maintained. Do you use our cycle highways, or do you mainly go on the roads?
I do go on the cycle highways when I go into central London, but I think because I live in southeast London, I think the cycleways and routes in southeast London are appalling. So when I'm in southeast, I cycle on the road for most of the time. But when I go into central, I use the cycle highways.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Because it's a sort of more safer route that go along there.
Yeah.
Any more questions from our studio audience? Yes. Go ahead.
So do you think services such as the Barclay Bikes, the Boris Bikes, Santander, etc., those sort of services, do you think they've made cycling more trendy, or do you think it's annoyed drivers more that those services are available?
Okay, we'll start with you. We'll start with Tor.
I think that's a very interesting question, because I think the people who are on the Barclays bike to some extent have no clue what they're getting up to, whilst probably people who cycle to work every day are actually more safe. So I think to an extent they makes the road more unsafe.
Having these Boris bikes.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, but I think there needs to be like some training or whatever.
Yeah, it all comes down to training at the end of the day, doesn't it? And Mike, what are your views on Boris bikes?
When they first came out, I thought to myself, fantastic, there's a bit more money coming in, that's absolutely fine. And then the more I got used to, having to dodge God knows who from God knows where on their bike, just doing whatever the hell they like and not paying any attention, it got to a point where I was just getting sick of it. At this point, we might, the ambassadors from different countries might as well get rid of their Mercedes, get a bike, because they've got diplomatic immunity on the bloody things and they can just do whatever the hell they want.
So sort of cycle around free range.
Exactly, and they don't know what they're doing. So
now this is an important point. Please, if you are going out cycling on any of our roads, please do always wear full safety gear, because that is something that everyone who is using the road should look out for. Now, obviously, there is, when you're in a car, you have to insure the car. Any accident that you're in is covered by that insurance. When you're cycling, on the other hand, it's covered under personal insurance. Have you ever been nearly, involved in an accident?
Yeah, probably several times, because I'm a bit of an idiot on the road. But there's one time I remember the most, where I was driving from Blackheath towards Charlton, and it was late, and the lorry didn't see me, and I was being a bit of an idiot, and I was almost run over, but there was a gust of wind who sort of pushed me aside.
The hand of God, almost.
The hand of God just sort of kept me alive.
Yeah.
And constantly, because, well, I try to stay as safe as I can, but sometimes I do stupid things. Like, my biggest worry is to be squeezed or crushed between two lorries.
You've just got to make sure that you're in the right place at the right time at the end of the day.
Yeah, because sometimes there is like congestion and I decide to go in the middle, and sometimes both of the cars decide to like, oh, we're going to do something. And I'm like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
So that happens quite often.
So clearly it's all about being sort of safe and aware on the roads. Do we have any more questions from our studio audience? Yes, Jack.
I think... See, I'm in the middle of this. I don't drive myself, and I don't ride a bike.
Yeah.
So I can see both sides of the coin.
How about from a pedestrian's point of view?
I suppose that's interesting. I suppose, pedestrians have got pavements, haven't they? I think the cyclists need a pavement. They need highways.
It's their own cycle.
And I think that's the only way you're really going to get any mutual respect between drivers and cyclists on the road.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask, whether you think insurance and lessons should be a thing that cyclists have to do.
So, yeah.
To both of you.
I think
Definitely.
I was looking at insurance this morning actually, so it's funny that you asked that question. Yes, I think it's absolutely something that we need because it's going to just going to become more cyclists and more cars. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like the cycling proficiency test needs to be brought up to date to give better.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I am joined again on Skype by Monica Thompson in Scotland. Welcome to the show, Monica. What is your question? Hello.
Hiya.
Hello. What's your question?
It's just that the bugbear of cyclists is when you get to traffic lights and they're at red and they think that they can just go on the pavement and turn round and cause all the problems that way, and you've got oncoming traffic. Why do they think it's all right to go through a red light?
So yes, we'll start with Tor. Do you run red lights? I shouldn't probably ask that. But why is it that cyclists do run the red lights, and do you think they should be allowed to?
I don't think they should be, I don't think they are allowed though, are they? I don't think they should be allowed to. I do catch myself doing it from time to time. And I think, I've thought about that question myself. Why do I just sometimes drive through when the car stands still? And I think it's probably because, the bikers or cyclists, the car drivers has sort of gone through the tests and they've read the law, whilst cyclists can just go and pick up a bike and go on the road.
Yeah. So it's coming back to that sort of proficiency test.
So I think there's a frame of mind going on there.
Now, a question that I always have about drivers is that we take our driving test when we're 17 and then we're let loose on the road if we pass. Should we have to, and I personally think that we should we have to take our test again sort of every 10 years, something along those lines, just to sort of keep on top of safety regulations?
Yeah, no, it's a very good idea. I remember my mother's ex-boyfriend, considerably older, he passed back when there wasn't a theory, it was simply the practical test. Yeah. You didn't have to do anything else. And he's been driving for 34 years now, something like that. And it got to a stage where we actually got into an argument about it, and I almost sided with the bikes for once. It was a rarity. In that, I do believe that we should, every sort of 10 years, go in and say, look, I do know what I'm doing. It doesn't really, I can still drive. I know exactly what I'm doing on the road, so just give me my card and let's be done with it. Whereas I think cyclists, they have a much easier time of it. You, like Tor was saying, you can just get on a bike and go and do what you want. And there isn't sort of a way of controlling that yet. And I think that if we have to do it, then they have to do it. I think
absolutely. So it is again a splitting. Do we have any more questions from our studio audience? Yes.
Well, I've got a personal experience. I mean, I'm from Poland, so I was never brought up in the UK before I came here. So I remember when I was maybe 10 years old, I had to pass a bike driving sort of test in my school to get a card. Then when you're 18, you have to go again in order to be able to let on the road. Do you think that could be a solution? That could be introduced in primary schools and stuff like that, where kids would learn?
Well, at the moment in the UK, we do have our cycling proficiency test, which isn't specifically enforced.
But do you have that for, when you're an older person, you don't have to have a license to get onto a cycling stage. So.
Well, that just goes back to what we were saying there. There should be more testings for cyclists on the road as well.
Absolutely.
But it's, at the end of the day, it does come down to sort of sharing the road with everyone else as well, doesn't it? Now, I do have a couple of statistics. In 2015, 21,287 cycling accidents reported, with 113 fatalities. And should cyclists be held automatically accountable if they are not wearing appropriate safety gear? Tor?
I think that depends very much on the situation. I think people should be wearing the appropriate safety gear, but I think it depends on if the driver has been acting out of order or not, because sometimes, I always wear my helmet, but the other day I just simply forgot, and then I came too far before I remembered, I don't have a helmet on my head. So I just continued. So I think, yet again, it's sort of like a mutual sort of thing that goes on there, because obviously the car driver isn't wearing any safety gear.
They're sort of in the...
They're sort of in the safety gear, but are they really, if they're crushed, they're crushed. So I don't think... I think it depends.
Yeah. Okay. So we also have our results from our Twitter poll for the second one. We asked you if you think cyclists should have stricter regulations, and you guys have said yes. Absolutely, which isn't that surprising. So thank you very much, everyone who tweeted in and got involved this evening. I am afraid that is all we have time for today. I would like to thank our guests, Stefan, Sean, Mike and Tor, as well as our wonderful studio audience, our Skype callers And thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.